If you've ever stood in front of a wall filled with white paint swatches and felt completely overwhelmed, don't worry, you are not alone. And yes, white paint really is that hard. What looks like just white at the paint store ends up throwing magenta on your walls, and it is at that precise moment that you quickly realize that if you do this wrong, everyone will know. What you originally thought was going to be a weekend task quickly throws you into the realm of design, understanding color theory, lighting design, and even just design context, things that you never really thought were all that important until right about now. And trust me, I know, I have worked in paint for 5 years, and even as a designer now, I see this issue happening time and time again. White paint really is that hard to choose, so let's discuss why it is that hard in these 5 reasons and how we can actually do it with ease. As I mentioned in the beginning, I think people get lulled into this false sense of security because white isn't seen as a color, so we don't need to know the color wheel or even lighting temperature. Because white is so much more subtle, it doesn't really register as a color, but the thing is that that subtlety is the reason why it is so hard to choose white paint. Now let's start with color temperature first. Color temperature is probably the most important thing to focus on before you ever select a color because of how drastically it will change your paint once it's on the wall. So if you have very cool toned lighting and then you change it to warm toned lighting after you paint, you might end up with a very heavy cream color that you weren't expecting. So although it may look nice under cool lighting, if you ever change it out, it might end up throwing a completely different color. And that is because of the different color temperatures. We've got warmer and we've got cooler. Just for your reference, most homes will have somewhere between 2700 and 3500 Kelvin sort of lighting. Most of the time, especially in modern homes, this will be on the higher end, and for more traditional homes, it'll be on the warmer end unless you specifically select this out. So if you were thinking about potentially changing out your lighting or your light globes at any given point before choosing a white paint, do it now before you select your white paint. It is so much easier when you have the exact color lighting in your home first. Now moving on to the color wheel, now that we have our light source selected, let's say we went for something that was 2700 Kelvin. So this is pretty warm for the most part. If you were to then go choose something that was really, really creamy, it'll just further enhance that because there's more yellow to it. However, let's say you wanted to choose something that was a little bit more on the neutral side, you might actually have to select a white that has some blue tone to it so it can counteract it because of the color wheel. Now, if you are wanting to understand the color wheel a little bit better, I do a whole video about it here. However, what we're talking about here are complementary colors. So you're wanting to use the color that is opposite, so then you can go ahead and find a neutral in between. So if your lighting's really warm, you might want to use a cooler toned white so you can counteract, and then it'll be a more neutral color in between. However, if you're wanting to further instill that certain color, so let's say, again, we've got that warm lighting and you really want that warm, creamy sort of look, you'll then go with a yellowy undertoned white, and they will continue on together to make a warmer, cozier look. Honestly, this one is like the woe of like 90% of the population. I think once people have an understanding of color theory, they tend to be able to figure it out on their own. But reason number 4 is understanding those subtleties. How do we actually understand the subtleties of seeing these colors so then we can understand the color wheel? Because I'm sure you're probably looking at all your whites and going, they all look like white to me. How am I meant to tell the difference? Well, one of the ways that I learned how to tell the difference when I was first learning to train my eye is to get a white piece of paper. One that looks like it's a true white, not that has like that bluey sort of tone to it, just like a true white piece of paper, cut a hole in it and put it over the top of your sample, just a singular sample. And then what you'll be able to do is, because you have this true white surrounding your sample, you'll be able to see what colors are being thrown. So you might be able to tell, oh, okay, it's yellow, but it looks a little bit greeny. And it actually has a little bit of like a grayish tone to it. So there might be some black. And then you can write down on that sample, okay, I think this has yellow, green, and black in it. By doing this, you'll understand, all right, yellow's a warm color. Green is technically a cool color. They're on the same sort of part of the color wheel. So it's a relatively neutral tone unless there's more yellow to it or more green to it. It depends, of course. However, once you've got that with all of the different samples, you'll be able to understand which ones you like more, which ones you like less, and so then you'll know whether or not you want a blue toned white, for example, in comparison to a red toned white, which will end up looking pink on some people's walls. Now, if you are someone that is colorblind or someone that just really struggles with colors and you're like, Tash, this is not working for me still, that is totally okay. Instead, you might need to go to the paint store and ask for the formulations. Now, you don't need to ask for the exact formulations, you just gotta talk to the paint person and just be like, hey, I really wanna understand what this white paint has in it. Can you tell me what tints are in it? So when you get a paint, it's tinted to the color that you want. So you'll have a pure white paint, and then let's say you want Lexicon by Dulux, they'll go ahead and add a bit of black into it, and then that will be Lexicon. So you'll then go, okay, it's got black to it. So white plus black makes it look gray. I will say, just as a little heads up, most paint stores, their black tint is blue based. So if there's only black in it, like that Lexicon example, it might throw a little bit of blue. So just keep that in mind. That's just a fun little tip from someone that's been in the industry. But with this knowledge now, you will be able to go, okay, I really like anything that has a green tone to it. I'm going to ask the paint store clerk, what are the other whites that have a slight green tone to it? And then that will help you narrow down your search as to which whites you like the most. Now, reason number 3 is a controversial take, and I know a lot of people don't like hearing this particular one. However, sometimes we paint our homes or update our homes and it just doesn't look right. Imagine a celebrity you know and they've got an outfit on that just does not suit them. The shape just makes them look frumpy, maybe the color washes out their skin tone. Now imagine them with an outfit that does really suit them. You think that they're glowing, they look healthy, it just fits them like a glove. This is the same with homes, and I think sometimes we struggle to balance modernization of a home with our personal preferences and the original intent of the home. So let's say you have a mid-century home. Mid-century homes had a lot of natural material, they were pretty warm in terms of tone, so if you were to go with a very cool toned white, like a blue white, it'll look wrong. Even though it might be your personal preference of having a more cool toned bluey white in your space, it doesn't look right because it doesn't go with the original intent of the home. Sometimes we have to make some sacrifices and balance these two. So perhaps you can go with something that's a little bit cooler toned, but maybe not as cool as a blue tone. So perhaps you could go with a green undertoned white wall instead of a fully blue undertone. Now, I know this certainly ruffles some feathers because it's like, well, it's my home, it's my choice, but the problem is that the original intent of the home, if that is not followed, you end up having this like contrasting fight between the original intent and the new intent of the home, and they clash. Now, if this is something that you're struggling with and you feel like, you know, you want to be respectful to the original intent of the home and make it feel nice, but you also want it to feel like you, I'd highly suggest checking out my video here. This one is all about mixing opposing design styles. So if that's something you're struggling with, I know it's not an idealistic sort of circumstance. Of course, all of us would like to have the exact perfect home, but that's not always the case. Sometimes we do have to work with pieces that we don't genuinely love. And this particular video helps us work through that and actually make it feel like it was intended to be that way. So although this is not a very popular opinion in terms of selecting white paint, sometimes you have to select something that works with your home, not against it. Reason number 2 is only ever going with what's popular. This is something that I see a huge issue with some color consultants and even just influencer culture in general. We get recommended these colors and so then we never venture out to those more obscure colors that haven't been suggested to us. So if you get someone that is recommending you a Dulux color, you'll go, oh, well, it looks great on Instagram, I'm sure it'll look good in my home, and then you put it in your home and you're like, that's pink. What happened? And the thing is that, look, Although popular colors are popular for a reason, it means that they work in a lot of different homes. It doesn't necessarily mean it will work in yours. There's a lot of different factors that play into this. There's your natural surroundings, there's different lighting temperatures, there's even just the layout of your home. So if you have like a really narrow, dark hallway, sometimes you might have to do quarter strength of the color that you choose so then it feels naturally flowing between the two spaces just because of the lighting. Although popular colors are great to start off with and are a great way to get excited about selecting paint, sometimes it's those really obscure and weird whites that you've never heard of that'll be the perfect one for you. I've spoken about this a couple of times on the channel, but when my mum had a previous home, we updated the space, and instead of having everything all cream, because that's what it was at the time, we updated it, and the color that we chose was something that we had never heard of before. It was called Shetland lace. On the color card sheet, it looked pink, but in this home, it was gorgeous. It made the home look like $1,000,000. It was a really great color, and personally, I would recommend it to a lot of people, even though it probably doesn't work in most homes. But in that home, it did. Now, this final reason is probably a little bit daunting, but maybe white isn't the right color for your home. Of course, we have plenty of spaces that work perfectly with all different shades of whites. Even the most subtlest little difference can work on most homes. But there are some homes there you just kind of look at it and go, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't look right. If you feel like no matter what you choose, every single white just doesn't look good, perhaps you need to choose a neutral. So of course we have creams, we have beiges, but we also have some really fun browns and pinks that can really hold a space and make a statement while still making it feel cozy and right. And although it's daunting to obviously look outside of the status quo because white is the 99.99% choice for most homes these days, sometimes a neutral might be a better choice. So if you feel like no matter what white you choose, it still looks wrong, or you want some more warmth or character, or just a little bit more depth, neutrals might be your best bet. So make sure you check out this video here. They're some of my favorite neutrals and they may be perfect for your home. I'll see you in the next design adventure.